Hey everyone, my name is Wedge and welcome to the Mana Source Tournament Report. While the weekend's Seoul Grand Prix was limited, another weekend always brings another Star City Open. This Open was held in Dallas, Texas, and we're here with the top 16. We should warn you that the following contains large quantities of devotion. The mechanic remains at the core of so many dominant decks. Fully half of this top 16 is made up of devotion decks. The other half is split evenly between control decks and aggro decks that don't use devotion. With that said, let's dive in and take a look. First place went to Hal Brady running a green-red devotion deck. The deck looks like what we've come to expect from the archetype, running a largely green ramp strategy. Red is there pretty much just for the Planeswalkers, Dominaid, and Xenagos. Those help lead into huge creatures like Arbor Colossus and Pelucranos World Eater. It's not really anything we haven't seen before, but clearly it's still effective. Second place went to a different devotion deck, Red-White Devotion run by Jared Lacombe. The deck takes a hefty red shell, souped up with devotion enhancers like Frostburn Weird and Boros Reckoner. In addition to Chain to the Rocks and Assemble the Legion, the deck also uses white for some new tech. Aurelia's Fury puts in an appearance as a one-of to lock down blockers or finish off opponents. When Gatecrash came out, a lot of people were wondering when this card would show up in Standard. Well, it took a while, but it's here. We saw another red-white devotion deck in 10th place, though the deck skipped the Fury and kept Assemble the Legion in the sideboard. In 8th, we had a blue-green devotion deck. While there is some green on the sideboard, the only main deck card that requires green is Frilled Oculus. It's a bit of a surprise, but the card is certainly more aggressive than the Omen Speaker it replaces. Other than that, the main deck is a textbook blue devotion list. The deck finished better than any of the plain blue decks in the field, so clearly they did something right. It's worth noting that the sideboard Master Biomancers probably also had something to do with it. Speaking of plain blue devotion decks, we did see blue devotion in 12th, 15th, and 16th. The decks were mostly what we've seen before, but the 16th place deck did try to main deck domestication. With a huge number of aggressive decks with many relatively small creatures, the decision makes sense. It was a unique move among blue devotion decks in this top 16, and it seems to have paid off. In 13th place, we had a black-green devotion deck. Like other devotion decks we've seen in those colors, the green is there for removal. A playset of Abrupt Decay has no shortage of targets, and the Singleton Golgari Charm can help get out of a lot of sticky situations. We saw a good number of control decks, but this time they were all running blue. Blue-white control in particular took 3rd and 5th. Both the decks made a slight change by adding Ratchet Bomb to the main deck. The 3rd place deck also had a Singleton Last Breath in the main deck. Both decks ran 5 counters, split between Dissolve and Syncopate. After weeks of seeing the only blue control decks making top 8s being Esper, 5 counters seems like a lot. But without black to kill creatures after they resolve, it proved to be the right choice. That said, Esper control is still alive and kicking, taking 4th and 14th. Both decks used their black mana to reach into additional win conditions. Both added a pair of Blood Baron of Viscopa, and the 14th place deck added an Obsidian Ghost Council as well. Other than that, the spell selections were pretty familiar. It turns out Hero's Downfall, Sphinx's Revelation, and Supreme Verdict are still great cards that go great together. The rest of the top 8 were straight up aggro decks. White-red aggro took 6th and 7th. We saw some slight variations with cards like Spear of Heliod and Boros Reckoner only showing up on one list or the other. Imposing Sovereign in the 6th place deck took the place of the Azorius Arresters in the 7th place list. On the whole, the White Weenie strategy shows that it can still hold its own against Standard's other aggressive decks. Green-white tokens took 9th place. Fun fact, only 3 non-land cards in this deck don't interact with tokens in any way. Elvish Mystic helps push forward to the higher spots on the curb. Boon Satyr is a fast threat on its own or can pump up a token, preferably something with trample or flying. And Loxodon Smiter is just a solid creature, with uncounterability as a great bonus. And finishing out the top 16, we had a red aggro deck in 11th. The curve is low. Apart from Chandra's Phoenix, nothing exceeds 2 mana, unless you count an overloaded Dynacharge. Yes, that's right, the deck added a single Dynacharge into the mix as a finisher. Like the black-red list we saw in the Grand Prix last weekend, this list also featured Madcap skills to boost its creatures and make combat trickier. And that concludes our look at the weekend Standard results. Surprisingly, we didn't see mid-range this weekend, almost at all. only black-green Devotion represented the archetype, and even that was hardly a traditional take on it. In fact, aggro is steadily taking over, if this week's results are any indication. But we'll see if the same holds true by this time next week. Next weekend is another without a standard Grand Prix, but there is an SCG Open in Providence, Rhode Island. We'll be back again next week with another Top 16. As always, subscribe below for the latest and most reliable Magic the Gathering information you could ever need. This is the Mana Source. I'm Wedge. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.